Hi, I'm Terrell Turner, the host of the Business Talk Library, and today I have another special guest on, Greg Brown. And the reason why I think this guest is special is because he, like many people, have experience with the entrepreneurship side, and I'm very grateful because it's in the finance and accounting area where he can speak to that, but also in the angel investing community, which allows him to share a unique perspective that not a lot of people can share. So welcome to the show, Greg.
Yeah, thanks, Terrell. Happy to be here, and thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. Now, before we jump into Cardinal Finance and the angel investing community, tell us a little bit about your background.
Sure. So, accountant by training. Grew up in Iowa. Was having a pretty standard public accounting career. Happened to meet a super wealthy guy who was functioning as what you would call today a super angel investor, and I had the opportunity to join his company as a CFO of his family office, which is what got me kind of off of standard public accounting track and into the world of working with startups and entrepreneurs. At that point, the investor side, and then from there, have just spent my career probably half on the investor side, either venture capital or angel investing, and the other half is CFO of privately backed early stage public companies.
Yeah, okay. Now, I think I know the answer to this question, but I want to ask, do you miss the public accounting over what you're doing now?
Not a bit, right? I didn't, there's a, part of it is accounting work is by nature repetitious, right? And so in public accounting, you sit there and like, oh my God, I got that guy's tax return again this year. What do and the other thing I didn't like about it was, unless you were on the advisory side in public accounting, it was all, you were looking backwards all the time, right? So you're an entrepreneur, I'm in there, let's say, doing the audit work. So first of all, I'm kind of a pain in the neck. You don't really want me there anyway. And I'm just telling you at the end, I'm producing something that isn't giving you any new information. Hey, here's your audit report that says that your financial statements are actually how you already knew they were, right? You already know what your revenue were last year. You know how the year, like, you don't need this audit report for anything. It's just purely a compliance thing. And so not very high value add for the entrepreneur. So, I like being in a more appreciated role.
Gotcha. No, I think I can definitely agree. I mean, for my time in public accounting, I mean, it was great for the fundamentals, but yeah, I definitely relate. It wasn't adding enough proactive value to the client. So bringing us forward into Cardinal Finance. So tell us a little bit about that and, what Cardinal Finance is up to.
Yeah, so Cardinal Finance, finance and accounting advisory firm. The most frequent engagement would be fractional CFO work. Also do some advisory work around transactions. Sometimes people are buying or selling something, maybe not a big enough transaction for them to hire an investment banking firm, but they need, whether it's just financial modeling, maybe some advisory work about should I do this at all, where my background on the investor side kind of certainly helps me in that world. My typical client would be a $5 to $20 million a year company, no particular industry segment. And, I often describe that what I'm doing for those clients in the fractional CFO role is I'm a translator, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've never met a business owner who doesn't have some sort of financial data on their desk or their desktop, right? But it's like a book written in a language many of them don't know how to read, right? Let's say it's a book written in Portuguese, right? And that doesn't mean they're not smart. They just didn't take Portuguese in college, right? So they just see numbers, whereas I see when I look at financials, I'm sure when you look at financials, you see a story,
Mm-hmm.
right? Those financial statements are saying something to you versus just being a jumble of numbers. And I think the CFO's job, one of the most important functions is to be able to translate the story that they see to the business leaders who may not be able to see that story because they don't speak that language. Have them understand what you as a finance person see in those numbers and why it's important to the business, right? They just see a jumble and say, we don't have enough cash. And you might say, man, you don't have cash. I know you think we should just go get an investor, but maybe it's that you're carrying, how come your inventory is only turning twice a year where the industry standard is every 60 days, right? That's where your cash is. It's in the warehouse.
Yeah.
Right. It's a lot easier. It can be a lot easier to address that than to just go find a lender or an equity investor.
Mm-hmm. No, I completely agree. And, it's funny you brought up that, I guess the Portuguese, because I can attest, like I worked in Brazil for about a year for a Fortune 500 company and as the leader in finance. And I will say, learning Portuguese is not an easy task.
No, I'm sure it's not. Yeah.
But I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just a different thing, right? I mean, you and I would sit in a technical meeting and we'd see technical data. Let's say it's a biotech company. We'd see all sorts of technical data about how the peptides are interacting with the proteins, or I don't know what. That probably made no sense, but it's just a language we don't speak, right? We would need somebody to explain that to us. Same with finance.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So now, if people are looking for your services or Cardinal Finance, where can they find Cardinal Finance, online or on social media?
Yeah, website cardinalfinance.net. Someone else got.com, got in there before me. And if any, you can, people can find me on Twitter if they want. It's at Greg Brown 407.
Nice. And now the other thing I wanted to spend a little bit more time talking about is the angel investing, because you mentioned something about, some people look at their cash and they immediately think, oh, we need to go out and get investors. So from an angel investor perspective, you have a different way of looking at businesses and insight there. How did that kind of come into play here in Charlotte?
Yeah, so my role is I'm the administrator of a group called Charlotte Angel Fund. Charlotte Angel Fund is a group of 120 individuals who have pooled some capital for the purpose of making early stage investments, typically in Carolinas-based technology-driven companies, but neither sector nor geography are absolutes. And there are two of us who have operational administrative roles in the fund in addition to being investors in it, and I'm one of those two. So I'm responsible for finding deal flow, right? What opportunities, what companies are going to be brought in front of the members at each month's meeting, and then ultimately leading the due diligence process, terms negotiation if that is a part of the transaction, those sorts of things. I got into that. There were a group of 10 or so individuals who'd been part of another angel investing group. This was in late 2013. They were looking to continue the activity and needed someone to put leadership around it, right? Because none of those 10 were interested in playing that particular role. Gotcha. And it plays well. I've been inside venture capital firms as a partner, and so I understand administratively how to do this work. And it's also important to me, right? I think that there should be a vibrant angel investing community in any city, right? I think that's an important part of the economic ecosystem. I think it's healthy for there to be a reasonably sized pool of willing early stage investors. So I wanted to see if I could play some part in making that happen in Charlotte.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Now, when it comes down to, like you said, finding the pipeline for early stage companies to invest in, what are some of the things that you guys are doing to locate, that talent, those opportunities?
A lot of it is via staying connected with investors outside of Charlotte. There are probably a dozen groups like Charlotte Angel Fund through the Carolinas who we have regular communication with. It's also, and that's a way to stay connected, for example, with startups coming out of the Triangle or someplace like that we might not see at a local meetup, but the folks at Carolina Angel Network up in Chapel Hill might. I also, one of the things that's helpful for me is I'm on the board of a group called NC Idea, which is a private foundation which provides funding and programming to help support entrepreneurial activity in North Carolina. So by virtue of that, it creates visibility for me. So some startups might be aware of me and Charlotte Angel Fund that wouldn't otherwise. And frankly, I get a peek into their grant programs. So I see up and coming companies who are applying for grants at an earlier stage than they typically would be investable by an angel investor, but I'm able to become aware of them, right? So that's good. And then locally, it's just staying connected, being present at events here in Charlotte, right? Whether it's pitch breakfast or things like that, just creating visibility within the local community for the Charlotte area startups.
Gotcha. Now, when it came down to, the angel investing, a lot of people, they hear about what that is. But, can you tell us a little bit about, what it was like actually building an organization around that idea of having an angel fund in the Charlotte area?
Sure. So administratively, not a big deal, right? You just have to put together some subscription agreements, a simple LLC, organize a monthly meeting. Part of it is having people understand the concept. What is it? What are we doing? Now, the good news is there are things out there like Shark Tank. So people say, oh, that's sort of cool. Look at those angel investors, right? They're investing in like the next new rollerblade or whatever that is. But having people understand that, why it's important, what the expectations are around economic return, why it's important that it be an activity focused on economic return as opposed to just this isn't a community development activity. There should be some positive community development that comes out of it. But if the investors don't make money as a result of this, it's not going to have staying power, right? If you think of a table, and if there are two sides of this metaphorical table, one side investors and the other side entrepreneurs en masse, right? The whole group of them. Investors aren't just going to keep pushing money over to the entrepreneurs forever. Eventually, what they want to do is they want to recycle cash that's come back to them.
Gotcha.
Right? So I'll say to entrepreneurs, who's responsible for funding startups 10 years from now? You are. Because if you don't return capital to the people who invested in your company, there's not going to be enough capital in the system for that startup founder 10 years from now.
Wow.
We getting out there and kind of evangelizing it, because Charlotte's more of a private equity, real estate sort of centric economic community as opposed to venture capital technology. So some of this is very new, right? There weren't a lot of people in the Charlotte ecosystem who had a lot of familiarity with what this was and what should I expect for returns and what are these kind of companies. They would, if you meet somebody who works at their day jobs at the bank, they think an early stage company is one that has $1 million of annual net income, right? That's early stage, right?
Wow.
Now, early stage is maybe no revenue. We're talking about a whole different thing, right? And we're taking a whole different risk, and there should be a different sort of magnitude of potential financial return out there for you in response for taking that risk, right? That you've got to go into this, you've got to have an opportunity to at least make 10 times your money on the deal if it goes well, for it to be an appropriate risk reward ratio, because the risks are high here, right? Real high. And if half the deals are going to go bust, the other half better do more than just double your money, right? Because if they don't, you're a loser in the deal.
Nope, that makes sense.
Yeah, so just creating some structure, and also helping people understand on an individual level. I spend time, sometimes an individual will raise their hand and say, hey, I think I want to be an angel investor. And you get into the conversation with them, and maybe the reality is that they don't, because they might have a misperception about what it is.
Gotcha.
And I think it's important. I don't feel bad at the end of the conversation if you, let's say you were the individual who raised your hand and said, hey, Greg, I got some cash. I'm thinking I might like to do this. And we talk it through and you understand the time horizons and the risks and just everything's involved. At the end of that, if you say, Greg, I appreciate this conversation. It's been helpful because I've now understand this isn't for me, right? This isn't what I want to do. That's a good outcome. Yeah. Versus you putting some money into some startup with the wrong expectation. That's just going to create friction between you and that startup founder, right? Along the way. And that's a negative for the founder, right? They don't need to. So it's better to create that clarity up front and have people understand what it is before they step into it.
Gotcha. No, that makes perfect sense. So if people want to find out what's going on with the angel investing fund, where can they find that online or on social media?
Yeah. Website, cltangelfund.com, CLT Angel Fund on, at CLT Angel Fund on Twitter would be the two places to do that. Both of those are fine ways. You can find your way to me through those.
Awesome. Now, the last question I like to ask every guest that comes on is, when you think about, your experiences and you think about your journey, and especially in the angel investing fund, what's two pieces of advice that you would share with other entrepreneurs?
I think a big one is, I think you can't be so dogged in your pursuit of perfection that you don't try things. Right? I think of business as it's a series of experiments, right? You get out, you try something, the market tells you, the market will tell you what you should have done, right? You're going to build a product or a service, you take it out there and somebody's going to say, yeah, if it was a little bit different, I'd buy, right? And you got to get out there. And so you can't take so long trying to kind of within your little cocoon, trying to come up with the perfect product or perfect service before putting it in the market. You got to create something, get it into the market and let the market tell you what it is you should be doing, right? What they want to buy. Second for me is you got to be open to the idea that you're wrong. Wow. If you're not, I'm sure you've had 100 guests on here talk about pivots of their business, right? Hey, I was doing this and then I figured out that so I pivoted over to this other place. If you're not open to the idea that you might be wrong, you're going to be way too late to recognize the need to pivot. Wow. Right? If you're just dead set on, man, I know it. And you know what? The customers just aren't smart enough to know how awesome my product is. Well, you know what? That's a hard problem to solve, that your customers aren't smart enough. Maybe you ought to listen to what they're telling you, which is you were wrong about what they want and what they need.
No, I think that is an amazing point. And, a lot of people have said something similar, but I've never heard anyone put it, so cleanly as, entrepreneurship is just a series of experiments. So I really like that. I'll definitely have to share that one and give you credit on that one.
You got it. Royalty free. You can have it.
Awesome. Well, Greg, thank you so much for coming on the show, for sharing your wisdom. We'll definitely include some links so people can find you online and social media and follow the updates of the great work that you're doing here in Charlotte and what you're doing just for the entrepreneurship community. So thank you so much for coming on the show today.
All right. Thanks for having me on. I enjoyed it.
Thank you for tuning in to the Business Talk Library. If you like our content, be sure to follow us on social media. And if you want to see more of our exclusive content, you can subscribe and become a member on patreon.com/Business Talk Library. Hey, the Business Talk Library is the place where business makes sense.